and honest journalist and founder of the Conscious Resistance Network, Derrick Broze.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to Anarchapulco. Let's give it up for Lark and Rose. I feel like they gave me a really killer slot, but also Larkin's a hard act to follow, so I understand if you don't know who I am yet, and hopefully by the end of this presentation you know a little bit about me and the solutions that I'm offering that I think are available to each and every one of us in this room and everyone who's watching at home. So I want to start first, though, just to this is a short little breathing exercise that I do periodically. It's a celebration of joy. It's something I do when I feel good, and I think if we could all do this together, we'll be a little bit closer, and the answers and the solutions I'm offering might make a little more sense to you. So if you guys will participate with me, I'd like you to howl with me. We could just fill this room up with a nice big howl. You know, it's like yogic breathing, except for you just taking a deep breath and let it out. You guys down for that? Yeah? Okay, cool. So on the count of 3, taking a deep breath and let out a howl. 1, 2, 3. All right, now I feel like we're friends, and I'm all right. So the first thing, who am I? Derrick Broze, they just said, investigative journalist. I have a radio show on 90.1 in Houston. I write for Activist Post, the Anti-Media, Mint Press News, several other independent alternative media organizations. I've also started the Houston Freethinkers activist community in 2010, essentially just an agorist community. And I've also started the Conscious Resistance, which is the theme of most of my work and the theme of today's talk, although I'll be using some different terminology. And, well, I've been an activist since that time for about 7 years. A lot of it started with meeting certain people in this room, including Adam, a few others, helped me on my path. But those things, journalist, activist, anarchist, these are just labels, they're not necessarily who I am. So I'd like to go a little deeper and tell you about who I am actually, the flawed human being, the former drug addict, the person still striving to find truth and honesty and courage every single day to pursue the freedom that I know I deserve and that each and every single human being deserves. So I want to give you a little bit of my background, and we'll start getting into the philosophy, the history, and all the things that I have to talk about today. Why does it matter, first of all, who I am? Why is it important that you know a little bit about me before I tell you the strategy and the solutions that I offer? The reason is because the story that I'm about to quickly rush through it's my story. It's a story of struggle. I think we each have similar versions in different ways, or know someone who has a similar story. And what I realized is that there's a lot of pain in this world. There's a lot of doubt, insecurities, fears, hang-ups that each of us as individuals, despite our understanding that authority is not beneficial to the future of humanity, we also have our own struggles to overcome. And mine came very early in my life. I was just blessed with having a drug addict father, and many people in my family, drugs, alcoholism sort of runs in the family, as they say. And so I had a lot of early memories going to visit my father in prison, knowing that he had crack addiction, and just weird memories that later on I was like, did that really happen, or did I imagine that? So there's a lot of confusion. I remember being as young as 5 and having suicidal thoughts, and just having these very dark places in my head and things that I don't think the average 7-year-old, young kid should be experiencing or stressing about. But I have those memories, and these prison visits, this in and out of this guy coming into my life for no more ever than 3 months at a time. He would come out, hang out for a little bit, make some promises, bail, go do his thing again, and next thing you know, hey, your dad's back in prison. And so I did the prison visits until my mom was tired of that. Got a little bit older. I remember when I was 14, going to my grandparents' house for Christmas, which was, he was out at this time period, and it was supposed to be a big deal. He was going to be welcome to Christmas. So I remember going there with a sort of anxiety and hope that, this could be something new. And as soon as I walked in the house, I could just feel that there was something, was not right. And I didn't see him there, so I kind of had a feeling things weren't going the way that we had been told they were going to go. And I was walking to the restroom, and I overhear my grandmother telling my mom that, yeah, he's already back in prison. He's, on the way back. And I remember going to the bathroom and just crying my eyes out, staring in the mirror and saying, I'm never gonna fucking let you hurt me again. I'm never gonna let anybody hurt me again. And I became very angry for the next 7 years of my life. I became very, and I just basically buried all that pain, all that misunderstanding, and a lot of it was blame, wondering if I was a part of the problem, that maybe I did something. And so that really began my misanthropic period of really thinking that everybody was a piece of shit, and because I must have been a piece of shit, this guy was a piece of shit, everybody must be like this, there's no reason to trust anybody. Everything is doomed, and just very nihilistic and more hateful, honestly. But my hate was born from pain, and that eventually led itself to just, I want to feel good. What makes you feel good? Drugs. Drugs make you feel great a lot of the time. And the thing is, I just got into a lot of trouble in high school. Everybody thought I was already on drugs. My mother's been accusing us of doing drugs since we were like 7 years old. The whole time I'm thinking, like, what are these things they're talking about? I need to find out. What are drugs? Because everybody's afraid of me doing them. This guy's in prison for these drugs. My mom thinks I'm on drugs. So then once I got to school and I started reading through the health book, and I remember reading the description for acid, and like, holy crap, I have to try that. And that would later play a large role in my evolution. But at this point, it was just, how many pills and random things can I stick in as many orifices of my body as possible? And lots of crazy nights. Really, I went from using Xanax, being just barred out in this haze all the time to deal with my problems. And it was the sort of thing where I'd have a bad breakup or just some emotional issue, and I'd grab 5 or 6 Xanax and shove them down my throat and wake up 2 weeks later, and what happened? Oh, my friends are all mad at me. Oh, I pulled a knife on somebody. Oh, I almost wrecked my car. And this was just a haze of several years, going from Xanax, then being on ecstasy, which, as Sterling illustrated the other day, MDMA in its purest form can be beneficial. But this is just, I'm just eating 3 or 4 ecstasy tabs 3 or 4 times a week until I'm just like a brain-dead zombie. And that was just a stage. It was going from one thing to the next. The end of 2004, I got out of this haze for a brief period of time, got a nice lady, got a job, an apartment. I was like, all right, I'm going to get my shit together. And my friends in that meantime had been some friends from high school, and honestly, they weren't really friends. They were just people who needed a place to get fucked up, and I had an apartment. And they would come over, and they were trying this thing that they called crystal. And, I just kept hearing about it. I'm the kind of person that just dives right in, so it didn't really turn me off or anything. It's like, okay, you guys are going down that road. Well, I got to work tomorrow, maybe one of these nights when I don't have work. Then there came a couple of nights where I didn't have work, so I was like, all right, I'll try this crystal stuff with you guys. All I knew is it was going to keep me awake for a bit. And I did a fat line of crystal meth, and later that night, I promised them, I said, oh, well, I get paid tomorrow. Let's go buy like $200 more worth of this stuff, like right now. And so from January 2005 to eventually November 2005, I just went through this 10-month, 11-month period of losing my job, losing the house, becoming homeless, selling crack, selling meth, becoming addicted to both substances, getting involved with a lot of just ridiculous things, putting myself in positions that I shouldn't have been, and treating other people like shit as well. And again, this was all born from that pain that I'd been repressing and not dealing with. And eventually, like I said, I got locked up in November 2005, got charged with possession of crystal meth, sentenced to 5 years on probation plus some time. I ended up doing between 2005 and 2008, I ended up doing 18 months in and out of different institutions in Texas, and state institutions, prison institutions, rehabs, some of them they like to call. And then about 3 months before Obama got elected, or actually the month before Obama got elected, I got released for the final time. I was now a felon with a charge of possession of controlled substance. But the beautiful thing is, before I went in there, I was actually able to quit meth. I just quit it all on my own. Like, throughout that whole summer, I was realizing I'm not happy living this life, and I would be around these people, and I'd say things like, hey, please, I really don't want to do this, so just don't offer me, because I will say yes. And this guy's like, yeah, me too. And, so I was looking for friends and hope, and there wasn't really much there. And I will credit cannabis for helping me out a lot, because if anybody's ever done a bunch of stimulants or something like crystal, then you know that it can really mess with your head and anxiety levels and things like that. So I would just sit in this little crack meth den that we were living in, and I remember just sitting in the corner with my bong and just smoking weed every day and I was just not using crystal or any other drug until I felt strong enough, basically 7 days, about a week later, I just got up, went in my car, and left, and I didn't come back. And so I got myself off. I spent the next month just getting clean from that, and cannabis helped me with that. But the reason I got arrested is because it's the sort of story of, well, I know I can make money. I've made all these connections over time. Let me just go do one more deal. And in this period of me being all drugged out, I'd been getting pulled over in tickets and never going. So I had all kinds of warrants. My tags were expired. I was driving around with a bong in my car. Like I was out of my mind at this time. So I needed some sort of help. I don't think that the state's institutions and prisons are the way to do it. And my story from going to that to discovering my own worth, my own value, starting to question the world in general, questioning the drug war, questioning government, and everything that has led me to this moment now is not really a typical story. There's a lot of hurt people in there that don't get help. So I don't think that prison's the answer and that prison saved me, anything like that. But I definitely remember about a couple weeks before, my mother finding me in this closet, just like on the ground, just sort of crying to myself, and she's like, "What is going on with you? Like, how can I help you?" And I just remember telling her, I just feel like I need a pause. Like, I need things to stop. Everything is going way too fast, and I was just, I'd been filling my head with all sorts of drugs and stuff, so I couldn't really think straight. And I got the pause, but not in the way I wanted it, but it was still beneficial. When I got locked up, I chose to just use every second, every day to my benefit. I was journaling every day, writing my thoughts and trying to understand how I got there. I started to write my father. Ironically, the week that I got out, that I went in, he was getting out from his latest institution. But sure enough, he was back before I got out. And so we were writing letters to each other from different prisons across Texas, which is not a fun feeling. It's kind of like, damn, I've hated this dude my whole life, and here I am for something similar. So I had a lot of learning to do and a lot of self-reflection. And that's what I used that time. As I said, it was 18 months over a couple years, so I didn't really get it the first time. I got locked up for 11 months. You figured that would be enough, but I went back 5 months later after I got out, did 3 more months, got out, got a DWI, went back for 4 more months, and like, wow, this behavior is still here. There's still things that need to be healed. There's still deeper layers that can be peeled back. And so through this experience, as I said, discovering the true nature of the world, in about 2009, I think I watched an Alex Jones documentary. I read Jim Marrs' Rule by Secrecy, and I read Ron Paul's Revolution Manifesto. And with those 3 things, the entire world was totally new to me now. And everything that I'd suspected, all this bullshit that I felt about the system, out of my nihilism and my just apathy for it, I was like, wow, this is why I've never felt drawn to these things. It wasn't because there's something wrong with me, there's something wrong with this institution. And it was only through starting to care about myself could I really care about the world around me. Because if we're all angry and hurt and bitter and full of ego and trapped in these things, then it's very difficult to say that, yeah, I really care about what Trump does, or I really care about the state of the world. If people don't even care about, if they can't handle what's happening in their own universe, it's very difficult. You may understand, you have a bad breakup or something traumatic in your immediate life, all of a sudden all these Facebook debates and bigger things, they seem so meaningless. And it's hard to care about those things until we are able to help heal ourselves. And that was basically the journey that led me to activism, that led me to start the Houston Freethinkers. I wanted to find people. I started going putting flyers all over downtown Houston, just, are you interested in this? Find us. And started with a group of 5 people, and now we're just doing amazing things all over the city. We were the only city in the country to kick the TSA off the buses. We've done beautiful things, and all of it came from this really dark time for me, and out of fear of like, wow, the world is going to shit. I need to find people. I need to do something. And again, that fear drove me to action, and that action has led to some beautiful things. I went and interned with Adam in 2012, learned a lot about video editing and just running production and doing man on the street interviews and stuff like that. So had a good time. And then when Adam got locked up in 2013, I was one of the people that came to host for him while he was on his spiritual retreat. And I learned even more, and people were willing to listen to what I had to say. So when I came back, I started my own live show and such, and it was around that time that my activism shifted even further, and I came up with this idea of the conscious resistance, and I realized that I'd been living in 2 different worlds in Houston. I had this spiritual communities, meditation communities, kind of conscious world that I would hang out with, and I had these activists, anarchists, journalists that I hung out with, but I was always really careful to keep them separate. I felt like either side wasn't ready for the message, and I've run into that often where you've got spiritual people who are like, no, I don't want to hear about what's going on in the world, or maybe they lean more, communism, statism. And on the other side, honestly, this crowd has not always been open to a spiritual message or to a compassionate message. And I've seen that change a lot in the last 4 years. So I had difficulty, but eventually I couldn't deny myself anymore, and the Conscious Resistance was sort of the name for that, of bringing together spiritual empowerment, spiritual awareness, spiritual liberation of not only the physical realm, but also the mind and the heart beyond that. And I think that's really where the true battlefield is. That's where our internal tyrant is constantly trying to get us to submit to different types of authority and to our own pain, and there's a lot of different ways to overcome that. So, I didn't mean to spend that long talking about myself and that story, but now you know a little bit about me. And the goal of the rest of this talk is to show that there is a workable path to freedom, and hopefully by the time I end this, you'll understand why I just shared all the information with you. So my path, my strategy is to promote and propagate the message of freedom, of liberty, of anarchism, and specifically the philosophy of agorism or agorism, depending on how you say it. Has anybody ever heard of agorism, agorism in this room? Yeah? Okay, cool. I know Larkin briefly mentioned it, and I think many of our thinkers in this movement and the activists understand that agorism seems to be the only actual strategy that has been put forth other than electoral politics or, I guess, meme wars. I don't know what the hell people are doing now. But so I'm trying to keep that message alive. And so the history of agorism, it's a philosophy that was created, the term was coined by Samuel E. Konkin III in the late 70s. He started developing it in the late 60s. He worked with Murray Rothbard, that many of us look up to his writing and his work, and another often forgotten activist anarchist, Karl Hess, who wrote a really amazing essay called The Death of Politics that was published in Playboy in 1969. It was really seen as this seminal moment for the movement that precedes our movement, where this message went sort of mainstream and people were introduced to the idea of anarchism as Rothbard was putting it. Is this thing working all right? You guys hear me? All right. Let's try this. Yo. All right, even better. So Konkin was working with Rothbard. He was working with Hess. He was alive during the time of the infamous student conventions in the late 60s where the draft cards were burned. And there was a period where the new left, the emerging new left, anti-war left, sort of the hippies and other peaceniks and such, were starting to have some prominence. There was also like the Black Power movement, the Red Power movement, the feminist movement. And along with that, but maybe a little bit further to the right, was the Rothbardians and Rothbard and his people. They were the libertarians of the time. And in the late 60s, Rothbard, Karl Hess, a few others, and Konkin teamed up. They actually had a journal called the Left and Right. And it was all about trying to build alliances between the radical left at that time and the emerging radical libertarian right, for lack of a better term. They worked with Carl Oglesby of the Students for Democratic Society. There's tons of amazing essays. This is my favorite period of Rothbard. If I am to bother with him at all, it would be this time period. And I think this is where the message really resides and where the strength is. This is difficult for some people to accept, I think, because of how we see how divisive the left and right are today. It seems like, yeah, right, there's no way to work with the left. But I've found it seems like the mistake is to work with the right just as much as it is with the left. There's a way to have an alliance and work with the best of both sides without pushing, saying we need to work with the Republican Party, which is essentially what happened with the Ron Paul movement. A lot of people found that was the best way, and after that, some of them just became Republicans, or some of them, became more conservative. So I think there's valid efforts to be made, aligning with both groups, with the best of both groups, and agorism came out of that. Essentially, Konkin said, we can create this free society, this stateless society we want, but we have to stop using their institutions. So along with being part of this new left movement that was going on, he came up with new libertarianism, which is another word for agorism. So he was using the language they were and trying to reach out and work with them. They had the counterculture. He created counter-economics. And counter-economics is the how-to. Agorism is Konkin's specific philosophy of libertarianism extended from Rothbard. He said that he felt like he was a more true Rothbardian than Rothbard because Rothbard ended up supporting political parties later in his life. So he put out the philosophy of agorism, saying that, and it comes from the Greek word, the agora, the marketplace. So this is market anarchism. And he said that the way to defeat the state is through counter-economics. And I'm going to get into this in just a second. Counter-economics is essentially working outside of the state, building counter-institutions. So Bitcoin is a huge part of that. Any time that you have the ability to not use the Federal Reserve note or the central banking currency of your country of choice, that is counter-economics. It's the black and the gray market. The gray market would be the areas that the state deems immoral. It's not necessarily illegal, but you're doing something, say, without a license, without a regulation. So anytime you buy cannabis from your favorite dealer and it's not done through the state, that's well, that would be black market because it's actually illegal in some states. But say you get somebody to cut your lawn, you get them to mow your lawn, to cut your hair. That's done without a license. That's gray market. Also, I would include activities like building in the community through participating in creating farmers markets and things like that. Things that aren't necessarily illegal, but they move power away from the state. They take economic power away from the state. The full extension of this would be the black market. So that's when you're using Bitcoin, you're using other cryptocurrency, you're using silver, you're bartering, you're doing anything else other than using the state's currency. So you're literally taking taxes away from them, you're taking their source of power. We all understand taxation is theft, and without those taxes, they would not have the power they have to wage the wars they do and to do all the things that they do. So if we are able to actually say, we don't want the Federal Reserve, stop using the Federal Reserve note. It's literally the only way. They're never going to pass an audit the Fed. They're never going to end the Fed through the system. You got to stop using it. And it sounds pretty hard to do, and it is pretty difficult to do. But Konkin thought of these ideas before Bitcoin even existed. He thought of this before the internet even existed. But he did predict that technology was going to continue to develop and that the counter economy would grow, that we would have an easier time of doing this as time went on. Now, what I've done is taken this concept of agorism and counter-economics, and in Konkin's two books, The New Libertarian Manifesto and The Agorist Primer, which I definitely recommend, they're available online for free. You can read them online or order them. Really short, simple books explain this very well. I'm trying to take his work and extend it and bring it into the future in the digital age with the technology that we have now, with the apps that we have now. All the tools are already there. We just need to bring them together and tie the strings, pull it tighter together. The counter economy is already existing. The counter economy has thrived. You can look at the collapse of the Soviet Union. You can see the use of the black market there. There's a thriving black and gray market in every single totalitarian state. No matter what they do, people will find a way to do business. And that is the true freed market. That is what the counter economy is. But Konkin described 4 stages of how we would get from statism to agorism, and he goes into pretty in depth in there. And we've taken that concept, me and my co-author John Vibes and some other folks that I'm working with around the country, including John Bush, have taken this idea and added the concept of freedom cells. How many of you have heard of Bob Podolsky? He's speaking here later. Bob's octologs, his concepts of small groups. Freedom cells are similar, and we worked with the idea that he put out there, but I think it's a bit more decentralized, where Bob has a pretty specific plan of how he wants the octologs to go, or believes they should go. And we're trying to keep the freedom cells as decentralized as possible. freedomcells.org. Check that out, freedomcells.org. So a freedom cell is essentially a group of 7 to 9, ideally 8 people working together. It can be used in dozens of different ways, literally unlimited potential with this. You can use this as preparation. So in Houston, we've got our group, everybody getting 3 months worth of backup supply of food. We got everybody using an encrypted form of communication, everybody having some form of self-defense. Things like that, right? But it also doesn't have to be just prepping type things. One time we got our group together and said, we want to learn about permaculture. So everybody pick a different aspect of permaculture. We'll meet again in a week and we'll teach each other about that. It can also be about sharing skills. The idea being that you want each member of your group to be on the same skill level. So if the shit hits the fan, if something goes wrong, some type of emergency, or if somebody leaves, the group is not all of a sudden, oh no, the only guy who knows how to build a fire is gone. Everybody should be on a similar skill level. There's going to be division of labor, natural skills that others have better than the other members of the group, but we can still get to a basic, similar level. So education, preparation, mutual aid, And what I want in the future as the counter economy and as agorism grows is that we get to the point, you've seen the videos out there where a community comes together and they stop a cop from violently arresting somebody. You guys have seen these videos like that? They happen periodically and we're all like, yes, they did it. It's super disorganized. There's always a chance the cop's gonna shoot somebody, and it's spontaneous. So it is spontaneous order, but we can have that spontaneous order, but we can use freedom cells to do some role playing. I have a video out called Organizing Against Violent Cops, and it talks about this idea of imagining getting to a point where when the cop comes in your community or you witness them beating somebody violently, that you come with your freedom cell or several freedom cells is the goal, linked together, working together, and make it clear without violence. Maybe you're open carrying, maybe you're just using the force of your intellect and your words to make it clear that your community is not going to stand for this. Maybe you disarm this officer. You tell him to get in his car and that the police are no longer welcome in our community. We're going to take care of ourselves. This is a future we can create. Now we're thinking of, and I'm sure some people have different views on this than I, but we're thinking about ICE and immigration, and I imagine a world where freedom cells can come together and can stop agents of the state from kidnapping people just because they're born on the other side of an imaginary line. That's something I would like to do. Or CPS coming to take somebody's kids because they don't vaccinate or because they smoke cannabis. Your freedom cell comes together and makes sure that that doesn't happen. It's already happening in other places. In Detroit, where they've been having their water stolen through the corporatization of that city and the statism of that city, people are getting their water turned off. They call them groups of angels. They'll just come around and literally form around a house and block the water trucks from turning off water. And they've had success all over the city. It's already happening. I don't care what you call it, but freedom cells, I believe, are the how to move agorism and the counter economy forward. And that brings me to vertical and horizontal agorism, which is that first slide here. And this is something that I'm creating. The language comes a little bit from Konkin and Per Byland, who is a Swiss, I believe, Austrian economist. He wrote an essay in 2006. Nobody paid attention to it. I found it and I loved it, and I'm taking the idea and running with it. So what we have here is the vertical, or what Per called the extrovert strategy, and this would be more of the Hessian. Karl Hess was more of community building. He was more like what I try to do. He was involved in the community. He went to the Adams Morgan neighborhood out of Washington, D.C. in the 70s and 80s. He helped put compost collection, rooftop gardens, aquaponics in basements, all kinds of awesome things. There's a book called Community Power, or Neighborhood Power and Community Technology, all about that. I know I'm throwing lots of references, but this is important information. So Karl Hess did more of that. That's the vertical strategy. And I think he's got these reversed. It's supposed to be vertical as introvert. Because what that means is you're ready to join the counter economy, but maybe you're not ready to join the bootlegger and the cannabis dealer and all the other people who are in there, putting their lives and their freedom at risk. Because at this point, the state has control, doing black market activity. And I should qualify this. Konkin, of course, believed the non-aggression principle. Black market has nothing to do with violence. He termed activity in the market which was illegal and violent as the red market. So when I say black market, I'm talking about strictly peaceful, non-violent, direct trade between people that the state considers to be illegal, but that we know causes no harm. So with the vertical strategy, which is introvert, this is where you can get started. And what this is meant to do is you start at the bottom corner of statism, and we're trying to get up there to the top right of agorism. And it's not just going to be a straight path. In the New Libertarian Manifesto, Konkin says there's no one straight line to liberty, but there's a graph, there's a space that we can describe. And agorism is it, and this is that graph. And what we have here is, so the idea of building a community backyard garden, right? So you start from statism, you do that. And you're asking, well, how does that create freedom? How is that going to end the state? Well, it lessens your dependence on the heavily corporatized biotech firms and the unsustainable and wasteful transportation, food production and transportation systems. So you take one step, instead of going to the farm or the grocery store where food's been shipped for thousands of miles around the country, you're going to your backyard, or you're walking down the street to your neighborhood. You're lessening power on the institutions that don't serve you, because Konkin was wise to note that power and corruption and authoritarianism didn't only come from the state. There's other forms of power that are limiting us, and that includes supporting these systems that ultimately don't serve the well-being of the individual, the planet, or any of the inhabitants. So you can start a community backyard garden. You can create or join neighborhood watches. We've started doing this. I recommend everybody here join nextdoor.com. Nextdoor.com. It's a private social network for your neighborhood. It's much better than Facebook because it targets to the neighborhood you're living in, the 5 neighborhoods. You can get as specific as you like. We've done this to spread agorism, to spread these ideas through that community. We, at the Freethinker House where I live in Houston, we basically put the idea out there when people were saying, hey, my car keeps getting broken in down the street. And you can post threads on there like Facebook, you can make events. And people were saying, well, let's call the cops, or let's put out a bike and let's electrify it. And when the thief comes, we'll just shock the shit out of them. And we suggested, hey, how about we don't use violence? Why don't we volunteer to create a community watch or something? Like, hey, the 3 of us in our house, we're down to pick a couple days. And people contacted us, and they were interested in it. It's a great tool to start infiltrating your neighborhood with the ideas of freedom and love. Creating joint neighborhood watches, creating freedom cells. Again, these are all the vertical introvert strategy. They're not bold and they're not actually counter-economic because they're legal, right? But they're still building community power, supporting or creating independent media ventures to counter the state of the propaganda, supporting or creating P2P, peer-to-peer, decentralized technology. These are all ways that bring us closer together. As I mentioned, nextdoor.com. There's also Cell 411, which is a great way to use your freedom cell to cop watch, to defend each other. And again, I mentioned the freedomcells.org website that we built to help you find people just like this. Now, the horizontal strategy is the extrovert strategy. This is the explicitly black and gray market, or the black market counter-economic stuff. And Konkin said before he wrote the book, before the idea of agorism had been put into paper, it didn't exist, So he's like, from this point on, now we have agorism. So the first step is discovering Konkin, right? Then you get into using alternative currencies. Maybe you're selling cannabis or other illicit substances for your neighborhood. You're providing a service to them, and you're doing so without violence. You create community defense through freedom cells, creating counter-economic markets. Now, of course, we all heard from Lynn yesterday, and we know about how the state treats counter-economic markets that are bold and open, even on the deep web, like the Silk Road, and we saw what happened to Ross. Konkin also wrote that we should be careful at how quickly we move, and this is why he described the stages, because he said if we move too quickly, the state would not hesitate to smash us down. And that's what happened with Ross. Ross tried to, I know Ross personally and Dread Pirate Roberts both quoted Konkin and agorism on the Silk Road message board, and I was at the trial reporting on it, and the judge said, as Lynn emphasized yesterday, that it was the philosophy that she felt was so dangerous. She specifically said, I have to make sure that no one dare take up your flag. So they're afraid of these ideas. They're afraid of agorism. They're afraid of us working outside of them and recognizing that we don't need their system, because as long as we keep using it, then it's going to keep existing. I'm going to speed along here now. I'm running out of time. I've mentioned the Freethinker House. That's the space I live in with the 2 other Houston Freethinkers. We have a community garden there. We do benefit shows every month to raise money for different causes. What does it have to do with anarchy? It brings community together. People come to our space. They discover what we're about. It's not just about preaching on Facebook or putting out memes. You have to connect to people. I've noticed in my 7 years of doing this, and about 5 being involved in this movement, there's a lot of voluntarists who don't do any sort of voluntarism activity in their community. They're not out there actually creating voluntary institutions to show people this works. And that's what agorism is about. Konkin called it A3, the agora, anarchy, and action. If you don't have action, we're doing nothing. So we need to move to a place of action. And we're using the Freethinker House and our space out there as a beautiful way to show people this, show agorism in action, and show these principles in action. So let me recap as I wrap up. Agorism, the philosophy of Samuel Konkin, building outside of the state using counter-economics. Vertical and horizontal agorism, as on that slide, show us a strategy to do this. As I said, it's not going to be a straight line. Maybe you build a community garden, then you use alternative currencies, and you build freedom cells. Either way, it's just sort of a tool to help you see that there's multiple paths, multiple ways to get there. And this brings me to my final point here. Every single thing I just spent the last 30 minutes talking about doesn't matter. None of it matters if we're all broken. Which brings me back to my first point of how I discovered the conscious resistance. If we're all screwed up, these ideas aren't going to work. We can create the counter economy, we can defeat the state however we want, give it 50, give it 100 and 200 years, and we're going to create the same thing until we start working on that internal battle that I was talking about, that internal tyrant. And this is what the conscious resistance is about. It's something new, though, that I've been calling holistic anarchism, which is taking the ideas of agorism, of community building, of all these things, and putting it together in a package. And this is also, this pyramid here represents an intentional community that I'm starting in Texas in 2020 with several other people. We're already working on this to build an anarchist intentional community, which we hope will be a part of a network of agoras, conscious agoras around the nation. So on the top, you have sovereignty of the individual, which comes from Josiah Warren, America's first individualist anarchist. Look him up, Josiah Warren, read Men Against the State. Know your history before Rothbard. And it's essentially the non-aggression principle, but I find it a much cleaner term. Mindfulness, bottom right, this would be meditation. This would be nonviolent communication, Sterlin's relational anarchism. This is the way that we connect to people. It has to be this holistic approach. Permagora, where's Eric McCool? Brother right there, check out permagora.com, the synthesis of permaculture and agorism together, a beautiful idea. Before that, I've just been putting sustainability in that corner. Then I discovered Eric's work and was like, yes, that's the final piece. And this comes together with counter-economics and agorism. So we have sovereignty of the individual, mindfulness, permagora as our cornerstones. Then we add in the philosophy of agorism, we add in counter-economics. And this leads us to the conscious agora. This is where I'm going. This is the direction I'm headed in. This is where I want us all to go. Agorism is not the only strategy. It's not the only answer. I don't want to sit here and say, like, I found the one way, because there's, as he said, there's many ways to get there. But for me, this is the path I'm choosing, because holistic, when you hear that term, I know some people are sort of triggered. They're like, oh, it means some hippie, spiritual, you've heard of holistic medicine, etc. The literal definition is holistic, dealing with whole systems rather than the individual parts. So rather than just focusing on the economy or politics, we're dealing with the whole system, the entire system. This is why it matters the way you communicate with people. You can be all amazing and badass on YouTube and Facebook, but if you treat everyone around you like a piece of shit, you're not a very good person, and you're not really going to get very far. Those things matter. The way we communicate, who we are as individuals does matter. It's not just about reciting the philosophy and knowing it like the back of your hand. So mindfulness, sovereignty of the individual, permagora, this is holistic anarchism. This is taking a holistic approach. All of these ideas that I've been going over will be available in 1 month. I'm running out of time here. My last book in the Conscious Resistance series is going to be released on April 7th. This is not a book promo. It is, but you can download the book for free. It's called Manifesto of the Free Humans. Everything I've just covered, holistic anarchism, it's a literal how-to create the conscious agora. Everything we've been doing in Houston is going to be in this book. It's going to show you guys what it's about. And we're going to take all these ideas on the road. This summer, myself and the Conscious Resistance and the Freethinker House, we're going to be touring the country, spreading these ideas. We want to come to your city. We're going to do meditation. We're going to have music. We're going to tell you about freedom cells, and we're going to help you build freedom cells. So by the end of this tour, we can have 50 to 100 plus freedom cells around the country. We can start building the Freedom Cell Network. We can start building holistic anarchism, creating the path to a stateless society. This is the vision that I have, and I hope you guys will join me in it. And if you do support these ideas, if you want to see us on tour, we're doing crowdfunding now. But other than that, I very, very much appreciate your attention today. I want to end with, it's a phrase that I say to sign out all my podcasts and broadcasts, but it's also a positive affirmation. And it involves a little participation again. So if you guys would oblige, please repeat this affirmation after me. I am powerful. I am beautiful. And I'm free. Thank you guys so much.
In a world where Antifa riots in the city streets, cops rage out of control, and the leader of the free world is a fat-ass casino owner, one event stands alone to make anarchy great again.
I actually love humanity. That is why I'm an anarchist.
Backwards in the building like we the ceiling, we illin'. No matter who find it appealing, I'm here and I got a feeling that we'll be dealing a lot of pain with the penicillin get drilled in your head. That we are monsters and yeah, we come from the slums, and for months we've been pumped, but for once I am now comfortable. I want to grow, I want some more success, and I want to know that greatness can't be rushed, can't be lost, so face the fuss. Feel free to hate on us, we lace them up. Dudes, we done paid them up. Keep snakes away from us and safe from us, you might wanna be. Remember when clowns used to make fun of me and that they wanna be me, see me and they run at me. I'm gonna be the greatest, yeah I wanna be, but I am not the one to be the fakest for the sake of being played.
media, fuck the banks, fuck drone strikes, fuck tanks, fuck hunger, fuck war, fuck ignoring of the poor, fuck the left, fuck the right, fuck the government. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.